Compulsive rumination is so painful. It is so painful to have something going around and around in your head and you don't want to be thinking about it anymore, but you still are. And it seems to intrude, it seems to pop up at all moments. But there is help for it. So let's talk about this. So, if you are ruminating and you feel that it is compulsive rumination, if something is a compulsion, it means that you can't not do it, but you know that not doing it is an option. Okay, I hope that made sense. But sometimes we do something that we can't not do, but we're not even aware it's an option not to do that. That doesn't count as compulsive. Compulsive means I know there is an option because maybe other people don't do it, or maybe there's been times in my life where I haven't done it. I am compelled to do this. So, the first thing I would like to ask you to do to figure this out might sound a little bit counterintuitive, but I want to ask you, what is the secondary gain that comes with that compulsion? Because all compulsions actually do have some type of secondary gain. Compulsive behaviors might give us a nanosecond of relief of our anxiety. Compulsive behaviors might make us feel like we're doing something productive. So, what is the compulsive rumination doing for you? Has your compulsive rumination tricked you into thinking that you need it? Like, for example, compulsive rumination with regard to health anxiety, people very often feel like, well, I have to worry about this. It's my health. Well, I have to worry about this. I'm having a test that comes up. I have to worry about it, as if that worry is somehow going to help them. And that's where knowing the concept of productive worry versus unproductive. Productive worry is, I might have a problem. I'm going to go for a test. Unproductive worry is worrying about what the results are until you get them. There's nothing else you can do. But our anxiety tricks us into thinking that we need it. So explore that. Does this rumination make you feel that you're actually doing something? Is it actually giving you some kind of a temporary relief of, oh, well, if I think about it over and over, I'll figure it out? So compulsive rumination is often seen as a part of OCD. And in that case, people might feel like they really don't have any control over it. And that type of rumination might be a component of other anxiety disorders as well. And sometimes treatment for OCD or severe anxiety that has a rumination component can be treated by a combination of an SSRI with talk therapy. So sometimes that little bit of biological help can help with that obsessive thinking. Now, I want to say I was a psychotherapist for 20 years. I did not prescribe medication, and I found that most people could really make major progress within about 6 months with a focused talk therapy or EMDR therapy approach on anxiety. But sometimes for particular anxiety disorders, and sometimes those which included a strong ruminative component. That word, I had to pause before saying it. But if you have a strong ruminative component to your anxiety, sometimes the SSRI can be very helpful with that. But obviously, this is something to talk about with your doctor, not to figure out. I'm just kind of pointing in the direction of possible solutions here. So, with that as background, I want to talk about 4 things that can help you from a self-help point of view, things you can implement from watching a YouTube video. So, these 4 concepts that can help you, they're sort of steps, but a little bit broader than that, more of a concept to really begin to integrate and then practice with. Number 1 is to fully convince yourself that your rumination is not productive and to understand what productive problem solving is. Because people on my videos will say, oh, I know this isn't productive and I'm doing it anyway. But some people will still think, I kind of need my rumination. But either way, understanding what productive problem solving is versus rumination. So our human brain is geared to look for problems and anticipate problems in the future, or to look at past events and identify problems so we know what to do differently in the future, right? Our brain is really geared to doing that to help our survival. Unfortunately, it gets off course because it does it over and over again, and it's really not productive. So, productive problem solving often has to bring in looking at a problem from a number of different points of view. Rumination tends to go over and over the same information from the same point of view with the same type of thinking. So that's why sometimes getting outside help or an outsider's opinion can really help. But generally, if we're problem solving something big or small, let's say we had a fight with a friend and we're worried about it and it really went poorly and we can't figure out what we did wrong or not. If we just keep going over it and over it and over it and feeling badly about ourselves and then badly about what they did and the same thing going over and over, we are not getting anywhere. Sometimes, if we bring in an outsider point of view, or we begin to journal for ourselves, or we look at, okay, what cognitive distortions are driving my way of thinking, and what can I do to think about this differently? Then we can move more towards problem solving. And then also, sometimes things don't have a solution. So our brain is stuck ruminating about a problem over and over that can't be solved. We can't solve something that happened in the past. We can sometimes learn from it with perspective and therefore change behavior going forward, but not always. And we can't change the past. So if something bad happened, and we're stuck ruminating about it because we wish that hadn't happened, and actually I have an example of this, then that's completely unproductive rumination. So really maybe writing out, right? I asked you to sort of write out or really think through your secondary gain from rumination, but then really write out what would be productive problem solving on something and what is rumination. Because until you're fully convinced that you don't need your rumination, you won't be able to let it go. The example I'm thinking of, and I think this applies to a lot of people who have accidents, is somebody who injured themselves in a way that changed their career because they could no longer continue doing the sport that they were looking to as a career. And the event that happened was a silly teenager thing, playing around. And the rumination that came out of that for this client was to go over and over how I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do it? Why did I do it? Mainly because they didn't like the outcome. So the secondary gain of that rumination was almost like this mythical belief that if they could have figured that out, they could have changed the outcome, and a pushing away of accepting the reality like, okay, well, this happened. Now what? Right? If we get into a productive mode, all right, my vision of the future has changed. And I'm not saying this isn't hard, very hard. There might be grieving, there might be a process before you can get there, but accepting what's happened, moving on, looking towards the future, more productive. Let me know if this made sense. Okay, so once you're fully convinced you don't need your rumination, then my recommendation is that you begin to label your thoughts. So when you are ruminating, label it. You could say it out loud, you could say it in your head. This is rumination. This isn't helpful. And the same thought goes over. This is rumination. This isn't helpful. So not allowing yourself to get into it, to indulge in it. And what helps you do that is the observer brain. So the observer brain, I talk about it in a number of my videos on anxiety, is developed. Meditation can really help develop the observer brain. It's the part of our brain that sort of sits back and looks at our patterns, goes away from the content. It's the part of the brain that is not looking at the content of what you're ruminating about, the mistake you made, the fight you had with your friend, the problem in the future. That's all content. The observer brain is looking at the process. The observer brain is saying, that's a ruminative thought process. So mindfulness meditation helps develop that. Therapy actually helps develop that. Spending the time and sort of non-judgmentally observing what your thoughts are doing and realizing, don't get too attached to your thoughts. Sometimes we just have thoughts. Not all our thoughts are true and not all our thoughts are important. So all of that leads to rewiring those grooves in your brain, because when we are in habitual patterns, we develop a pattern of response. And those synapses are all wired together, they're firing together, they get to know one another, and fight with friend, boom, 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 rumination, continual rumination, can't sleep. Like it all gets tied together. So putting in place those things that can cut that pattern, right? Because you can think about your brain as if you're walking a path on your lawn or in the woods or wherever, the more you walk it, the deeper the groove gets. If you keep walking that same path on your lawn, you will have an area where there is no grass, assuming you live where I do and we have grass, not where, but you know what I'm saying. The path gets more and more worn, and that's what happens in our brain, and it has to be cut by, and there's a whole lot of different techniques. You can check out my other videos on rumination. And I also have a webinar called Rewire Your Brain for Joy and Confidence. It talks a lot about how these habitual patterns develop, why, and what we can do about them. You can go to my website. I'll put the link in the description below and register, and really learning about how every thought and behavior, all those things that go together, right? When we do a behavior that goes with a thought, we are reinforcing patterns all the time. And we can actually change the neurobiology of our brains by changing those behaviors and not having those thoughts connect to these behaviors or those events connect to these thoughts. So check that out. There is hope for recovery here. Let me know what you think about this video. If you liked it, please do hit that like button, subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you next week.